The thing that I preach to my team the most is people, not brands. My mission is not to win awards. It's not to make banging cocktails. Honestly, it's to promote these spirit producers that are, I think, ultimately by societal trends like people not drinking, going to disappear if we're not careful with it. So that's where things like awards mean a lot to me, because it means that people will see you can get rewarded for doing that and not just falling back on it. Thank you so much for having me.
No, my pleasure. All right, Max Reis, thank you for joining us. Max, you are I guess you would say, barkeep.
Sure.
A beverage director, a restaurateur, hospitality entrepreneur, and a partner and the beverage director at Mírate, and which is an excellent restaurant in Los Feliz.
Correct.
And a place that I've really enjoyed going. When we were talking just a moment ago, we were asking if we should name you Max or Maxwell, and you said that Maxwell sounds like you're in trouble.
Yes, either being scolded or flirted with, I guess, on either one. So,
okay, cool. Tell me about the first one. Who was scolding you?
Oh, probably my mom. I would guess my mom. Or one of my aunts. Yeah.
Okay, so that's you got a full house of relatives, or
not so much these days. My parents actually live up in Napa, California, but I do have lots of cousins and aunts down here, so I see them fairly frequently.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't get scolded too often these days, though.
That's good.
That's good, yeah.
But back then, like, what were you getting in trouble for?
I had ADD up the wazoo, still do. So, but when you're a kid, that affirmates a certain amount of unmanageability, I would assume, as a parent. So, plus I'm a beverage director now. So you can tell in my young years, I probably developed an interest for beverages and such, which affirmated in some needing to be scolded for sure.
Sure. Well, I'm going to tell you, it's not your fault, Max.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It's not your fault. Do a Goodwill Hunting. Tell me about the first sip of a alcoholic beverage that you have ever tasted.
That's actually, I remember I convinced my mom to let me try a sip of beer on a camping trip one time, but I'd say noticeably, and probably my favorite initial actual interaction with it was I grew up in Napa. One of my friends went into his dad's wine cellar and got a bottle of wine and opened it, and we all drank a bunch of wine, and I just remember a lot of insanity ensued. And but when the parent came home, it was my favorite. Was he saw like 4 smashed 9th graders, or in his house, and his first reaction was to say, "What did you open?" So, which was a very memorable experience for me.
Yeah, because in a Napa wine cellar, it could be anything.
Oh yeah. There's a multitudes of possibilities there.
So positive experience.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say overall, didn't get in too much trouble. It was super fun. I got a lot of clout at school for regaling the tale. So, I guess overall a win-win. And here I am today as a result. So.
Yeah, there you go. It was that win, that popularity win from getting smashed with the other kids.
Yeah, why not?
What kind of led you to the path of getting more into beverage?
So I've been cooking since I was a kid. I do have, I've discovered as I've gotten older, I do have kind of a hereditary lineage of chefing in my family, and I've been cooking a lot since I was a kid. I was like, my mom would come home and I would have attempted some random, recipe from a book, and at a surprisingly young age, though, like horrifically young.
What?
Like 5,
5, you're turning on the burners and
oh yeah, I was baking horrendous cakes. I remember the first cocktail I made my mom. I knew she went to the store, and I decided to greet her with a cocktail. So when she came home, I remember taking tea, lemon juice, and some cooking chinzano that was probably cooked to smithereens from the top of the stove, putting it in there, and her bracing for impact, and her being like, "It's actually not that bad." So, but I basically was in that mind just for a passion and a hobby. And then when I was in the restaurant industry growing up, I remember thinking I was maybe wanting to become a chef, but then I convinced myself that everybody working the line and everything had been doing that with purpose their entire life. And as a 19-year-old, it was probably far too late for me to pivot to become a chef. So at that point, I looked to the bar and I realized I liked talking to people and I liked being creative and I enjoyed culinary within that sense as well. So I thought if I started studying when I'm 19, by the time I'm 21, I'll be 2 years ahead of everyone else and I'll get a jump on it. And I guess it worked because I'm sitting here talking to you now.
Here you are. You did it. You made the career out of it.
Mm-hmm.
What makes a drink delicious?
I think intentionality. I think that a lot of people think cocktails are a way to effectively hide alcohol to get smashed, like my ninth grade story there. But I think intentionality from tip to tail is what makes cocktails special and memorable. Spirits for me, I think, are the main focus. I think that in the chef world, there's a lot of focus on where things are sourced from and farms, but for some reason there's this weird thing in alcohol where it's like, just give me the cheapest thing that's going to get me there quick, and it can become this giant factory, and I don't care, just it's already poison, I'm just going to drink it. It's almost like as like a metaphor, would be almost like if Michelin star chefs were being awarded for making a GMO tomato taste amazing. You know what I mean? That's kind of the challenge. It's how to hide it, how to disguise it. Whereas I think what makes cocktails special is finding a story that the spirit is telling, because there's so much history behind it, and building around the spirit to where you're experiencing that, which is the base, and accentuating it, but making people understand it and enjoy it, but in a way that they might not have been able to before because it might have been too intense. So it's introducing people to the spirit through a thoughtful manner, but then also, I don't know, it's just, it's refreshing, it's social, so it's a real hospitality moment, because you want to create something where you're taking something that can be confronting and you're making it less confronting, which typically isn't what you do in food, right? These ingredients taste good and you're compiling them to build this thing. Alcohol, you're taking something and you're kind of baby proofing it for the masses, but in a way that is going to be intriguing and get them ideally started on a journey where they're going to get to a more sophisticated place and maybe drinking neat spirits, which is what a lot of people do.
I think it's quite parallel to getting a great ingredient and then preparing it or cooking it in a way that brings out the most of that flavor. And so when you're making a cocktail, you're choosing a spirit with intentionality, and then you are trying to do something not to at the high level, at your level, you're not trying to hide the flavor of that spirit. You're trying to bring out the best of it. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, at my establishments, I'd say one of my favorite things I do is I source. So like our well, which is normally something you would hide, it's very much like this thing that society, you hide it, it's the well, you don't want to see it. And you walk in, if you're on a date, you, as a status symbol, you ask how you can upgrade from this lowest offering. But at my spaces, that's a window to how we can support people with the most volume. So I source privately for these places. So our house, gin, rum, tequila, mezcal, all that's from like families. So that we have a relationship with, where the money's going. So it's a place of quality in my bars. So going back to like accentuating, it's like if I hide that, I'm actually doing a disservice to like so much work that I'm doing, and then also to these people that I actually can apply a face to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are the names of all your places?
So we have Mírate, which is the establishment in Los Feliz. And then we just opened up Daisy Margarita Bar, which is in Sherman Oaks. And then we're about to open Gil Perez Bar above that, which is focused on Mexican rum. So one of them's more mezcal focused, one of them's more tequila focused, and one's Mexican rum focused.
Wow.
And kind of the idea is that with the focus of each, we're able to kind of feed into each other to create a more sustainable version of what would normally be like completely unsustainable for one, which is getting all these private batches from these places. Because, if you could get 100 cases of something, that can be intimidating. But if you disperse it, it's pretty doable.
Pretty doable.
Yeah.
And quick hack, order from the well, because they don't skimp on the well. If you're going to any of these spots, you can order from the well and tell your date that's actually special. Like, I'll take it from the well.
Yeah, why not? It's a place of quality.
Rum is interesting. Whenever I think about rum, I'm thinking pirates.
Sure. Yeah.
Why?
I mean, to be honest, it's got the naval integration of that over the years has been big in terms of like, I mean, gin and rum were used to pay sailors to ship things. It also has like a pretty dark history rooted in the slave trade, and so it was a currency, right? So it was basically you were taking slaves and getting them to make sugar, and what was left over after making sugar was molasses, and you made it into rum, and that was a currency to carry all over the seas. So if you were to raid a Navy ship, you'd take their currency, which was their rum, and that was that, So it's got a really beautiful and really dark history to navigate, but it was a currency. Yeah. So pirates like currency.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains the yo ho ho and a bottle of rum and 15 bottles on a dead man's chest,
Sure.
etc.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the other secret histories of spirits that people don't know about?
Of spirits? I mean, there's so much. I mean, if you want to go back to kind of that era, like you see a lot of like Navy strength and things like that. The reason why I'm sure pirates would have loved to drink wine or these, other ferments and things like that. But the reason why these high proof spirits would be on ships and traveling is because they were high proof. And if you were to get into a storm or to get raided by pirates or cannonball went through the wall or whatever, if the spirits, which were being stored in barrels next to your gunpowder, spilled on it, they could still light on fire. So that's kind of the history of why these things are so hot.
Wait, we're saying because they preserve flammability?
Yeah. So
we want that.
Yeah, because if your gunpowder gets wet with wine, you can't light it on fire. It snuffs out and you can't defend yourself, which I think is a pretty interesting fact, right? So if you're getting Navy strength on a gin bottle, that's actually what that's
what it means. Navy strength means that it's not going to dilute or make your munitions ineffective.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's surprising.
Yeah. And then like proof was a big one too. If you see a proof on a bottle, that's because if you were loading onto a ship, you want to make sure that the captain or whoever was paying you wasn't watering your money down. So you would light it on fire as proof.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
Yeah. I mean, the mezcal tequila world, which is where I swim the most, that's interesting. And I could wax poetically on that forever. But like that to me is probably my favorite spirit category, like Mexican spirits, because it doesn't originate from these kind of dark places where a lot of other global spirits originated from. The only rum that wasn't based in the slave trade is actually the French agricole rum from Martinique and Mexican rum. But it's really freaking cool. I mean, that's all comes from history. That's actually a lot more ingrained in terms of like Aztec and Mayan drinking rituals, which I think is really cool. And it has a lot more significance to the people. But that aspect of the spirit category I love just because what a lot of people don't realize is that it's crazy to see these things scale. Because when you're actually talking to the families that have made it, it was basically party juice if you were going to have a celebration at your house. So the idea of watching these big brands scale it all over the place has been a really interesting thing to kind of be involved with. So it's when the tequila boom now is kind of coming out of this, I'd say kind of negging of Mexican spirits for a long time, because I think like if you think about barrel aged tequila, right, that's like the sophisticated version of tequila. For the longest time ever, tequila was being basically, they were like, oh, it's a spirit from Mexico. It's clear it can't be good. And then all of a sudden in the bourbon industry, they wanted to make more money because they also these rich people also owned the places that made the barrels. They passed a law saying, hey, now you actually can't use the same barrel twice to make these American whiskeys. You have to just buy a new one every single time. So they approached Mexico and they said, hey, if you want to be classy like these Europeans, you have to buy these barrels from us and age your tequila. And now it's like we can't even imagine it without it. So it's like there's a lot of like historical and significance and a lot of like control involved in it. But like I think it's really cool to dig into the history of these spirits because it shows a lot about how the world has interacted with these cultures and also how these people deal with their own cultures. And I don't know, it's really cool, but it's all about sustainability and trade and culture and a lot of time like purifying undrinkable water, things like that, and then also interacting with food, which is, I'd say probably the most significant part, right? It's part of your everyday life, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I got all sorts of facts. I can keep going.
Who is the first human to ever get drunk?
I'm assuming someone that, probably some kind of caveman that left out some berries for too long or something. But
you can get drunk just by leaving out berries?
Well, they would produce alcohol, right? Because they would ferment. You'd have to eat a lot of them, most likely. But I mean, I guess it depends culturally. Supposedly distillation was born in China, but that wouldn't necessitate being drunk because you would have had to have ferments to distill. So
beyond just the drunk, I mean, beyond like just the qualifier of drunk, like where is humanity discovering that you can drink this or ferment something and make you feel a certain way, and why?
So the earliest that I'm aware of, I'm not a historian, but I do find it very fascinating. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. But my earliest understandings are that people were making things like wine and beer and ferments because they discovered that if you added the alcohol to undrinkable drinking water, it would purify it and allow you to drink it. And then also beer had such high water content that the intentionality behind beer was to actually make this ferment that you could drink instead of water and actually hydrate, which is pretty interesting. In religious practices, it grew into the fact that when people were fasting, like monks could still drink beer, and that would how they get their nutrients, So it was a lot of it was like actually fortifying your body, which is pretty interesting, or loopholes around certain religious practices, etc. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm assuming someone just like, again, left out some juice for too long, it fermented, and they didn't have any resources, so they drank it anyway, and they went, honestly, I feel pretty good right now.
Pretty good right now.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think it's also interesting about the tradition of monks and monasteries in the development of spirits and beverages. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and why that is? Because I thought that it was like, oh, they can't drink, they have to abstain or something.
I mean, a lot of it was like the way that these monasteries like funded themselves too. You know, these monks and green chartreuse is like or green or yellow chartreuse is like the most infamous version of that. But then, that's how these monks would actually get money. It's almost like how cults sell jam in the side of the road and stuff like that. It was just like, what can we produce to sell to these people? A lot of the time it originated in some kind of medicine. So there's usually some kind of medicinal benefit that they believed. So like green chartreuse, I believe originally they thought it had a big medicinal practice. It actually, the original was called it was basically elixir, so like an elixir, and you would dash it into other liquid, and that would be kind of your remedy. It was like good for your stomach, etc. And then eventually they made it into the lengthened form, which was more easily potable. You didn't have to have something else to add it to, and that was actually the first ever liqueur that was ever created, was the lengthened green chartreuse, which was pretty interesting.
Wow.
But I mean, like, even in like Mexico, for example, there's an agave called Tobala, which is a wild agave that grows in Mexico, or specifically Oaxaca. And back there, when you'd make mezcal, you would never make a single varietal. So you never, like, now it's like when I'm selling it at my bar, I would pick like a particular kind of rare agave, and they made it just out of that, and that's what makes it expensive. And as a consumer, you get to experience that. But back in the day, it was basically all field blends, because you were going to throw a party, whatever's ready, you'd huck into the pot basically, and that would be that. But like Tobala, I thought was really interesting, because every time I've been down there and I'll cough, someone will try to hand it to me because they think it's good for your throat. Or they said that they actually save the puntas, which is like the high proof, the heads from the distillation. So like the Tobala mezcal at like 65 to 70%, and they actually give that to diabetics to regulate their insulin. So whether or not it's true, there's a lot of these kind of medicinal backgrounds, and I totally see that. It's like, imagine trying a distillate for the first time, not knowing it is. It's just like hot. It almost feels like it's cleansing you. It's intense.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. I think there's a lot of really interesting storytelling embedded in these in spirits and the history of them. And how do you know what's true and what's not true?
I mean, you don't. I think one of the biggest ones that I think it's controversial now, and not in the mainstream. So this is probably the most people that are going to hear about this. But like in China, they've been always historically cited as having the earliest distillation. Or they're the first people allegedly to build a still, take a ferment, distill the alcohol down, and get a high-proof spirit. But they've found all these pots in Mexico that have they found agave fibers and all these things in it, and they predate Chinese distillation pretty significantly. And it's been a huge debate, and all these people are kind of like covering up a lot of the research and denying it, because it's going to bring a lot of glory
or shame. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's a lot, man. It's crazy.
And so a ferment, that's what we're calling a beverage. Anything that ferments and then there's alcohol is produced in that.
Yeah, like everything from kombucha, wine, beer.
Yeah. And it seems like everywhere that there are people or humans, there's a distinct version of it in every part of the world.
Oh yeah. I mean, what's crazy to me is like China, right? Baijiu is the number one selling spirit in the world, and most other countries haven't heard of it. So it's like, it's kind of crazy. It's people get so specific with their personal rendition of that, which is nuts, at least to me.
What is your favorite cocktail?
That's very tough. That's very tough.
What are you ordering?
I mean, to be honest, when I get off of work, a lot of the time I'm usually drinking neat spirits and like a beer, just because I've create cocktails for a living, and usually my palate is just blasted if I've been creating and tasting, et cetera, et cetera. But I really gravitate to like very flavorful, nuanced low ABV beverages. Like a sherry cobbler is one of my favorites, which is kind of old manny of me to say, but I love it. Tea punch is one of my favorites, like TI, not tea, like the steeped beverage. That's one of my favorites. Or just like a simple daiquiri, honestly. Like, it's just an amazing cocktail that is just so simple, but like, simple cocktails mean that the ingredients shine more, and they're also easier to mess up. So it's, just because it's simple in the build, it's just also easier to screw up.
And you feel like you're on vacation when you drink a daiquiri.
Yeah. and I'm always on vacation, so hey.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's always on vacation.
It's true. I'm always drinking daiquiris.
He also
Day
drinks Scotch neat. Okay, what is your favorite spirit to drink neat? And why?
Mezcal, for sure.
Why?
Mezcal, to me, has the most historical significance. So from just like that level to talk about, I think it's incredible. The people involved with it, like it's such a budding category that's been so diminished by society, like beyond anyone's possible belief, that like you really feel like you're supporting something cool that has, and like lifting up this underdog basically, which is great. But to be honest, outside of that, that's what really drew me into loving it. But it's just delicious. It's one of the few it's one of the few spirits in production that doesn't have traditionally any water added to it. So the essential oil content is out of this world. It just keeps going and going and going. There's so many different variations. Agave also, it's like it takes so long to grow. Some of the agaves that we make mezcal out of, 25 years, 28 years. Those sugars develop so slowly that the nuance when you ferment them is just absolutely incredible. And then also, if you drink a well-made mezcal, you don't really get as hungover. Like you can get pretty smashed on mezcal, and as long as you're not dipping into other substances or cocktails or mixing with spirits, like you're pretty good the next day. And that has been a proven fact for myself many times, and that's how a lot of the locals feel too. So it's
that alone is an incredibly powerful marketing point.
Oh yeah.
How does one become an agave goblin?
I've basically been in this as long as I can be. Like, I don't know, like, we've been talking about whiskey and things like that. Like, if I wanted to get super into whiskey, and I love whiskey, but like, it's an expensive, well appreciated spirit. There's going to be some old man that's been doing this longer than I can possibly imagine. He knows the history. He's got an crazy catalog. Or he or she or whoever has like expendable income, and they can learn, and it's going to take a lot of resources for me to catch up to that. Whereas mezcal, I came in at this opportune moment where there was like 2 or 3 in the United States. So I gained an incredible interest in this underdog. And then I remember when like the 4th one landed, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and now it's this booming category, but I've been there the entire time. So I've been given this incredible opportunity to just learn as I go, where other people didn't want to learn about it. Like, and if it's crazy is if you go to like Oaxaca or Michoacan or Guerrero or anything like that, like, again, these people are making it for themselves. Like, you'll go 10 minutes as the crow flies, someone else's house, and they've never tried their neighbor's mezcal or anything like that. So even in these regions, no one was an expert and nobody cared to try to be. It was just like this thing I make to party with. And so I've basically, like, I don't know, I would never call myself an expert. I'm like an enthusiast because this is a homemade item, and I've never met all these families, and I learn something every day. So I'm definitely not an expert. I don't think there is an expert out there, but agave goblin just kind of cracked me up because it didn't paint an image of shmee, like buttoned up. It was more like we're having fun. We're not detracting from it. And then I was in a metal band for a long time, so that was very much fit my personality.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like goblin for it. And do you become a goblin when you, like, how many drinks in do you become the goblin?
Oh, I'd say even before I'm drinking, I'm just like hoarding my mezcal. I'm just a goblin with my, I'm
like a goblin, like in the greedy sense.
I guess so. Yeah. I'm like the Gringotts goblin in Harry Potter with my bank, I got my back catalog. But honestly, I just thought it was funny, and everyone else seemed to think that was funny when I put it on my Instagram, and it's become an inescapable part of my life now.
Or like the precious. I don't know why a golem makes me think of goblin, but like,
oh sure,
you have the precious. What? Okay, can we go back to this thing about how mezcal doesn't get you hungover, because this is a big deal, and nobody knew this apparently.
Sure,
I didn't know it. Why do we get hungover?
So basically, when you're distilling, there's 2 components that are produced and that are highly regulated. One is ethanol and one is methanol. Ethanol is alcohol, right? So if you were to get rubbing alcohol, you're getting ethanol. If I was to buy 100% alcohol to make a extraction with, I'm buying 100% ethanol.
Do not drink that.
I mean, you can, but I would.
You can drink 100% ethanol.
I mean, I have, not like as a hobby for fun, but if you taste it, it's not gonna.
It's not going to kill you.
It's not going to kill you. Yeah.
In small dose.
I mean, I have mezcal at my bar that goes up to 75%. So that's 75% ethanol. And I drink that, and it's enjoyable.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, please continue. So you got your ethanol.
And then we got our methanol. So when you hear about a moonshiner losing his sight, that's because there's an excess of methanol and it's burning out his like ocular, So it's like basically so ethanol is also, or sorry, rather methanol is also what in your system is what basically makes you hungover. So if something is higher in methanol, that's where you start to get a headache. That's where these negative effects from alcohol, because you're basically microdosing on making yourself go blind and all these
That's
things.
the poison.
Right? That's
the
the
poison is the methanol.
Yeah. And, this is where I don't want to assume and talk about things I don't know, but I do know that like, that's where the things like this, it interacts with things like sugar, things like that. And that's what creates this like dichotomy of hangover, right? So if you were to make, I'm talking about mezcal right now at 75, 80%, right? If you were to have a lot of whiskeys at that proofing, that's where people were going blind, etc. But actually agave spirits, because the sugars are, they're different, right? It's an alternative sweetener for a reason. It's a different like, glycemic index that interacts with our body differently, and with fermentation and distillation, it actually produces the least methanol out of any spirit. So basically, if you're drinking mezcal neat, you're not leaving it anything else interact with. It also has the lowest amount of that, so you're going to get the least possible hangover you could get out of ingesting ethanol. So,
and that's just the nature of the sugar that comes from the agave.
Yeah, exactly. And there's ways to mess it up. A lot of ways to mess it up. Like people say that about tequila, right? They're like, oh, you don't get as hungover if you drink it neat. But like the majority of the tequila that's on the market these days has all sorts of additives, things that regulate color or add mouthfeel, glycerin, things like that, or just straight up sugar. And that will get you hungover. So it's not like you can just go out and grab a bottle of tequila or mezcal and not get hungover. But if you do get one that's properly made, that's going to be the least hungover you can get. And too much of a good thing is still too much of a good thing. If you drink a whole bottle of mezcal to your face, you're probably not going to feel great the next day. But
right, because even if there's less methanol per volume, enough volume you're going to get.
Yeah, it also dehydrates you and all sorts of stuff. But
why is it that if you drink different drinks, you get more hungover?
To be honest,
like if you mix different things.
I think that the variety of spirits do produce different qualities, like we just discussed. If you're fermenting beet sugar, if you're fermenting sugar cane, if you're making it out of sugarcane molasses versus fresh sugarcane juice or agave, it's going to produce different things that interact with your body differently. And I'm sure there's a lot of science behind that. It's like different weed strains and stuff like that. They're like, there's different terpenes that interact with different things and make you feel differently. So honestly, I think you're just kind of casting a wider net and you're just catching more things. And the variability of you feeling crappy is big. But honestly, it's like, I'll be at home and I'll drink some amazingly produced rum, some amazingly produced, tequila or mezcal, and I'll combine all day and I'll feel fine. I think it's more once you start introducing different sugars in there. And then also, I don't know, the biggest one for me that I think needs to be kind of debunked is the whole white versus brown spirits. Because some people are like, I only drink clear spirits. I started with clear, so I can't go to dark spirits, etc. But like, why would wood? The only addition to that is wood. So why would that make you feel differently? You know what I mean? Unless there's something in the wood.
Sorry, what about wood?
Well, I just meant like there's like this perception from a lot of guests that if you're drinking a clear spirit and you switch to a brown spirit, that's like a no-no. But in actuality, the only thing that's adding that color is the extraction of wood from a barrel. So I just think that's like a illogical statement, which is really funny.
Wait, that's why brown spirits are brown, is because of the barrel?
Yeah, it's a barrel extraction.
Somebody knew that? Nope. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, like allegedly, like I think the story behind that was, and this is guessing, but like Elijah Craig, which is the whiskey's named after, right? Supposedly he was I think he was religious as well. He was some kind of like priest or pastor or something like that. But he was running whiskey illegally, but it was white whiskey at the time, which we would now call white dog. And he was transporting it. So he would put it on these barrels and he would send it down the river and he would get his money, etc. But one day there was a fire and it charred the living hell out of his barrels, but he didn't have any more. So he put it in anyway. And when it arrived at the destination, they popped it open and they were like, can you do that again? And that's like the birth of barrel aging, which is kind of nuts, at least within whiskey. But history is funny.
It's great. Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. Beer than liquor, never been sicker, liquor than beer, and you're in the clear. Why?
Beer before liquor, never been sicker. Probably because you're kind of drunk by the time you get from beer to liquor and you drink it too much.
That is the correct answer. Yeah. That is the correct answer. Yeah. Because if you're drinking liquor on the tail end, then you're in trouble. There's no regulation.
Yeah. You've lost your faculties.
So you solve that mystery pretty quickly. Okay, cool. What is the first original drink that you created that you were like, oh, I'm proud of this?
That is a very, very good question. I mean, I remember my first bar gig. I came up with like some concepts beforehand. I'm trying to remember. I had this one that was called the So Fresa, So Clean, which I thought was really funny. But I remember it was like one of the first ones I ever made where people were like praising me a lot for it. So it felt very affirmating, but I was using aquafaba instead of egg white. So it had all this crazy texture. And it had some, Blanco tequila in there and rose water, strawberry. And I had a locally produced strawberry brandy from Ventura I put in there to like flavor layer, etc. But yeah, I remember it really well just because it was like even the most basic drinkers came in and they lost their mind over it. And then also some seasoned cocktail people would come in and be like, this is really cool. And when I got to talk about the technique, they were really interested in it. And it was cool. It was one of the first times people were like really stoked on something I made like that. But to be honest, like I spent a long time, like a lot of bartenders, just kind of under a tutelage of a older bartender. And a lot of those years were meant making classics. So I went through years of making classics, but the fun part about that is that you tweak the classics around the spirit. Because like a Negroni with a gin that's 48% versus 42% is going to balance very differently because sugar and alcohol balance each other. So I spent a long time more just getting into understanding spirits and how they interact with things. Same way that a chef knows that, you add salt to things and fat. It's like people can come over to my house and like, wow, you cooked amazingly. I'm like, yep, it's because I worked at a French restaurant. I know that if I had butter and salt to everything in a multitude that would freak you out, it's going to taste really good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting how flavors interact. But
right.
Yeah, I'd say that's kind of, I remember when I was at Republique for a long time, I remember I just took a Negroni and then instead of stirring it down and adding water like you would when you stir it, I remember adding a ounce of fresh Car orange juice to it. And then chef losing his mind over it. And my boss at the time being like, I can't believe you just blew chef's mind with this really simple thing. Mainly because he was like, don't do that because it's he's going to add it. He's going to ask to add it to the menu. And this isn't indicative of what we should be putting on the menu. This is a very simple thing.
Yeah.
Not to say simple's bad, but it's, it broke some rules, I suppose. But
that's interesting because I was going to ask you about knowing the rules before breaking them.
Yeah.
And what is the first rule that you broke that was like a breakthrough for you?
Some of the first rules I broke that were, I mean, I use a lot of like molecular gastronomy techniques at my spot. So there's a lot of things like clarification and carbonation and all that. And I do think that those things get abused and they get a bad rap because, it's like, I don't know, if you sous vide something, that doesn't mean everything is better in the sous vide. People get a little buck wild with these new techniques when they come out. But I think like dilution swapping was a big one for me, which is really cool because basically like batching has a really bad rap. Like guests still don't understand the benefits of batching, and you feel kind of obnoxious explaining.
When we're explaining batching is like when you make a batch of a cocktail and then you dispense it.
Yeah,
and the guests they're like, oh, we want to see you do it al minute. We want to see you do it right in front of us.
Yes,
the whole thing.
Yeah, and they assume that it's a lesser quality, and it would be if there's like fresh citrus, like things like that. Like there are certain things you don't want to batch, but like if you batch a martini and you get it to a alcohol level where it won't freeze in the freezer, that just means you have a perfect martini that is colder than a human being could stir it, which is ideal for a martini. So it benefits the guest, it benefits the cocktail, and it benefits the establishment because it's easier. So like, what's not to like kind of thing. But in batching and opening those things up, it opens up the discussion of when you're shaking or stirring a cocktail, you're adding a lot of water, right? So a lot of people don't realize when you're making cocktails at home, if you have ice cube tray in your freezer and the ice tastes bad because you're storing it next to frozen onions, it's going to taste like that when you put it in your drink, right? So, but it also in that vein, if you were to freeze, instead of adding water to that, one of these cocktails, which is what you're introducing, if you were to take like a clarified juice or something like that and add it rather than adding a neutral element, which would be water to a cocktail, you're adding another flavor and it gives you the ability to really mess with some drinks. So I really, really enjoyed kind of figuring that out. Not just like coming up with it myself, but figuring out how to do that and playing around with that. I thought it was really interesting because more opportunities, the better. And also don't get me wrong, people go crazy with that. Like, it is really important for cocktails, also water. So it doesn't work across the board. You don't just want this like thick, opaque thing all the time that's like overwhelming for the palate. Sometimes you want that water to thin things out. But that was a really big one for me, was figuring out how to like batch and manipulate these flavors that have been these like staples in cocktails since day one and kind of figure out how to literally reinvent the wheel, and then also explain it to guests why you're doing it and why it's not a bad thing, which can be a challenge, a big challenge.
There's a big storytelling challenge with doing something new in cocktails.
Oh yeah, yeah.
People really feel like, you know, they have their favorite, they know the way that they want it, like James Bond likes it shaken and not stirred, for example. Okay, I think you said one thing that is important to know, that people should know, and I feel like is overlooked, is if you're making a cocktail at home for guests, you're entertaining, make sure your ice tastes good.
Oh yeah.
What are some of the other tips for a home bar?
Home bar, I mean, ice tasting good is a big one. Like actually having nice ice, there's a huge difference in that. Understanding why things that are sitting there and getting warm, etc. Don't, like batching a giant cocktail with citrus. You can do that. Like you can make a giant margarita, but actually understanding that there's a difference between the viscosity of the various things. Like I could stir lots of drinks, but the reason you can't stir a margarita is because the viscosity of the lime and the sugar are different. So you actually have to slam them together in order for them to actually combine, or else you're going to get a wave of bitter and tart, and you're going to get a wave of sugar, right? So like making lemonade at home, it's the same thing. So if you were to batch a giant cocktail, you can just take an immersion blender, slam it, and if you do that, it's going to combine the sugars with your bittering agents or your acids, and it's going to actually create a balanced cocktail. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. It's like,
so sorry, what did we talk about slamming?
Just like slamming them together, just like citrus or acids.
But how do we slam things? What are we doing?
Well, I was saying you could use like an immersion blender.
An immersion blender being
that.
like one of those like, bzz, and you dip it in the drink, and it just like agitates it super intensely.
Exactly.
More so than stirring with like a spoon.
Exactly. So if you were to make a pitcher of margarita, if you were to actually do that pitcher, which is totally fine, but you were to agitate it at a high level first, like a bartender shakes, it'll actually make a much better cocktail, and that will actually do really well for your guests and actually taste pretty great.
Yeah. And then you can just be like, yeah, I just slammed this.
I just slammed it. Yeah. Yeah.
And people be like, what?
Yeah, well,
and
what
you'll be
did
like,
you do
well,
to
let
that
me help
drink?
you. Let me tell you the story.
You're like, now I don't want the drink anymore.
What are the rules of serving guests at a bar? Like, what's the art of the customer service angle of working the bar?
You know, that has changed a lot recently, and I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up, because like when you brought up earlier about James Bond, like that is something that's really hard to escape. So there has to be a lot of hospitality and tour guiding right now in bars, because if you look at like my bars have gotten on like the 50 best bars thing, and people come in with these expectations, but like I'm not a 50 best bar because everyone that walks in can get whatever they want. Like there's a lot of prep and thought and systems in order to make these things scalable and consistent. So like the era of walking into most bars and being like, here's my drink, I want it. Like there's a lot of people that will walk in and they'll have a card, it'll say like Larry's Mai Tai, and here's the ingredients, and make it for me. Like,
what?
Oh yeah, that's a thing. That is an actual thing. And a thing no one likes, so don't do it. but it happens. But you know, I think a lot of it's like making the guests feel comfortable, and also, you know, understanding why they're there. I worked at, you know, really nice restaurants for a long time, and when I was at Republique, for example, that was back before they had a wine list, and they were renowned for their wine program. And people would come in there on a date, and they would sit down and they would say, "I'll have the house red," and I was like, what does that mean? Like, we don't have a house red. Does that mean the cheapest wine? And eventually what I got to in my head was, oh, this guy's on a date. He's bringing his fancy person in there, and he doesn't want to seem stupid. So he's just saying, give me something, because I don't know what to order. And it's all about just ego, right? So I think a lot of it is just making a guest feel comfortable and meeting them where they want to be met, and basically being like, we always use the word edutainment at our bar, because like basically the rule of thumb for me is to like basically be like, hey, no one knows what any of this is. You're here to discover something new. You're not here to navigate this thing that has this aura about it where you have to know what these things are. Like, I'm not going to shame somebody for ordering a strawberry daiquiri again because they think it comes out of like a frozen machine and it's not like a shaken drink or whatever. So I think it's just about like politely navigating guest expectations, and then also just meeting them where they want to be met. Because like also realistically, like I might have, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I might have all these rules I'm navigating for myself and my team. But at the end of the day, like, someone wants to come into the bar and they want to like chill out and relax. I also need to be able to identify that, and I need to be able to pander to that in like a kind way. So, I mean, modernly, I think it's, if you want a really good cocktail experience, I would say go into the bar and do what they do. But that being said, if you're there to relax, that's my job, and I don't want to make myself appear pretentious. So, it's a good metaphor would be, I have a lot of tattoos, and the worst tattoos I have is when I go to an artist that has a style and I ask them for something outside of their style.
Right.
And in cocktails, that's very acceptable, but no one would ever walk up to a fancy chef and go, hey, be like, oh, hi, here's the sushi omakase. And you're like, I actually feel like spaghetti. I want spaghetti.
No, they do that.
Yeah.
People do that.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's not recommended.
Yeah, not recommended.
Oh, wow. Okay. What is the perfect blood alcohol level?
The perfect blood alcohol level? Oh, man. I don't know.
What's the right amount?
I have no idea. Definitely below 0.1, right? I mean, I would assume if you're 1.2, you're in the hospital or something like that. I'm going to go with 0.08.
0.08 is a responsible, and then you get your Waymo, and then you can go home. Now, have you seen the movie Another Round? The Danish film.
No, I have not.
It's about a group of teachers led by Mads Mikkelsen they're just kind of bored and they're just feeling complacent, and they drink a lot in Denmark.
They drink weirdly in Denmark.
They drink weirdly.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me? Actually, you know what? This is going to be more interesting. Why do they drink weirdly in Denmark, and what is it?
They don't have citrus. That's not endemic to Denmark. They can get it, but it's not like a prevalent thing. And so much of alcohol has been built around citrus, like so much culturally, like in majority of the places where there's a drinking culture, there is citrus, and there's really not. So there's this like real dryness to the drinking culture. Lots of like if you have like an Amari from the local one from Denmark, there's like no sugar in it, like none. It's just like herbs and alcohol. I mean, there's a little bit of sugar, I'm sure, but not a lot. This comparatively what everyone else drinks. If you were to check out a beverage tasting menu, there's lots of ferments like kombuchas and things that I'm sure have sugar, but read extremely dry. So I think just due to that, the drinking culture there and the palate has just completely leaned into that aspect of things. And people are exploring it, and people are, obviously going other places, trying other things. But what I've found is that people that have lived there and haven't necessarily explored that, because that's not really their thing, when they do have these drinks that are endemic to them, they're usually citrus free, and as a result, a lot of times sugar free or very low sugar, which I thought was really interesting. So lots of ferments, not a lot of distillation made into cocktails.
Right.
Yeah, not a cocktail culture.
Right, because they just don't. That's just not part of the culture. They don't have those ingredients.
Yeah.
In the film, Another Round, the teachers decide that 0.02% alcohol level all the time makes life just a little bit better.
I believe that.
But then things get a little, because it turns out that alcohol is addictive.
Sure.
And so then things get a little weird in the movie.
First taste is free.
Tell me the story about the most shit-canned guest you've ever had at a bar and what you had to do.
Oof, there's a lot of aspects from that. It's especially modernly, it's a little tricky because as a bartender, we are trained to identify when people are getting there and making it stop before it like officially happens. But nowadays, people will come in, they'll have one drink, and then something else they took will interact with it and
you don't even know.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh, you're schmammed, and it's probably not on alcohol. It's just ridiculous.
Schmam.
Yeah, I mean,
good.
I'm trying to think of a particularly enthralling situation where I had to kick someone out. I mean, we had this one guy that we had to kick out that when he left Mírate, and this like broke my heart. He was so drunk, and it was his birthday, and he was being horrific to his girlfriend. And like, he was like, she was going up to use the restroom, and he was loudly talking to our team, saying these like awful things like about her while she was gone, and then being on his drunken best behavior, trying not to fall out of the seat. And I remember like really politely cutting him off, and man, and then as we were very nicely, we took care of some stuff for him, and we were just trying to be really kind and, offering him some water, and then, maybe, hey, if you drink some water, maybe you can drink more later. And on the way out, he just took down one of our like handmade ceramic trays of all these handmade copitas for mezcal and just like smashed it on the ground and all these things. And I just remember like, I'm a smiley guy, and I was just smiling and shoving down my emotions and just like, hey man, cool. We'd love to have you back again sometime. Let's get out of here. You know what? I'll take care of your bill. Don't worry. I mean, that's always a fun one, but I mean, honestly, like back in the day was the funniest because I feel like there was less rules. I would get in trouble for telling my staff to do this now, but one of my favorites back in the day was when people would get too drunk at the bar, the bartenders would tell me to just give them juice, but you would dip the tip of their straw in alcohol and they give it to them. So when they tasted it, it tasted just like pure booze. And they were like, oh, this guy likes me. It's heavy handed. But in reality, you're sobering him up to hit the road, which I always really love.
That's great. You're doing it. Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's like alcoholic gaslighting. It's good.
It is. Yeah. And you can still charge.
Hospitality gaslighting.
No, they're like, this one's on the house.
Yeah,
and it's
totally.
like literally just mixer. And then they think that they're legends, that they can just like drink unlimited amount.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about one where the guy was like, let me jump behind the bar and show you how to do this thing.
Oh, man. I mean, that's awful. I mean, worse than that even, because you can say no to that, is when people reach and they start eating the stuff off of the bar top. That's the worst, like the absolute worst. I did have a guest that was really drunk one time, and I looked over and I had denied him service, and then I looked and he had grabbed a bottle of expensive mezcal that I had been showing the guest next to him, who was drinking like really nice stuff, and he started going after it. So that wasn't fun. But at the end of the day, I was kind of
So what do you do? Do you have to fight for the bottle, or like, what are you like, sir, please, sir?
I took it back, and then I started explaining to him why it wasn't okay. And then I was like, why am I explaining to this guy why this like simple facet of society that he violated is unacceptable? And I was like, I'm just going to stop.
Cool. This bottle's not yours.
Sir, you took a thing that does not belong to you at a business that sells this thing, and you do not plan on paying for it. So
inhibition's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, honestly, I've gotten pretty lucky. We just have like a lot of people that just get yelly and weird. I had this one guy. Oh my God, this is actually a pretty good one. We had a guy named, and that's what he went by. And he came in and he would get drunk at Mírate, and he would try to, he would just do everything to try to provoke. And I was so confused. So he would get in my face and say all this stuff, and I would just keep my cool and be nice. And he would just like try to like, he'd go over and, start talking to girls at dining at his table and start doing these things and progress. And I remember he like he was doing every hot button item. He started bringing in like race and all these things as things that are like, sexual orientation and anything he could find that like he was applying to himself that would maybe make his attitude like, flip on me. And it was really, really funny because he eventually, I pissed him off so bad because I kicked him out with kindness, and I think that really got him going. So I eventually had to kick him out because he was drunk, and I like set him off on all that. But he came back the next time, and I heard from my managers that he was doing the same thing. And he was like, when he left, he was like, I hate this kid, blah, 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 blah. When he came back, he goes, where's that nice short Jewish guy? I like him. He likes me. Like, let's talk to him. And it was such a freaking nightmare. But like, eventually it was really funny because I finally looked him up on the internet, and I found out that he was the person that basically would go into places, make the establishment enraged by breaking all the rules, and then he would take out his cell phone and start filming right at the end when he was getting kicked out for these reasons.
Oh.
And yeah,
my God,
it was insane. And then, but I looked, and he had done that a bunch of times where he would then show the video to people and then get like 40 people to show up at this Starbucks or something and like close them for business for the day based on this thing.
So he's a literal professional troll.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was insane. But he would just, oh my God.
Goblin versus troll.
Oh yeah. Goblins always win though.
Louise,
Goblins
man.
always win. Yeah.
That troll, I mean,
that was
crazy. I like
that
the
was
term
insane.
kicking him out with kindness.
Yeah.
He's like, at least treat me bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Kick me out of here.
Some people, they want something to be mad at because then they're not mad at themselves.
That's why he was mad, because you were doing it so nicely that there was no content.
They're like, I'm not an alcoholic. You're mean. I'm like, nah, you gotta go. Sorry, I'm actually not mean. It's the former for you. So you gotta go.
Okay, so if things really hit the fan and you need to pick a weapon from the bar, what is it?
Well, that's tough because I don't want to kill anybody. But if
that's your choice.
If there was no consequences for my actions, I would grab the liquid nitrogen. Yeah, big time. I got.
How would you use the liquid nitrogen?
I would just throw it at him. That would it probably wouldn't hurt him, but it would be horrifying.
It wouldn't hurt them. It sounds to me like you're trying to do a T-1000 freeze and shatter.
So
this is a Terminator 2 for the young people. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. They have to freeze the liquid Terminator.
Yeah.
And then shatter him.
Yeah, or what is it, Boris at the end of GoldenEye? I am invincible.
That's behind him. That's a good reference too.
That's a good one. Always solid.
GoldenEye, good one.
Yeah, solid
Bond movie. Yeah.
And a great video game. But
the best video game.
So liquid nitrogen is funny. not funny. It's dangerous, but I have it behind my
No,
bar.
it is funny, but go on.
Sure. But the trick with liquid nitrogen is it wants to escape. It wants to evaporate. So it's only dangerous if you trap it. So I pour it on my head all the time or on my hand and you're fine. But if I was to take like my hand and then cup it so it couldn't escape and evaporate, it would burn me.
Right.
Right.
So if it gets on your skin and then it's trying to escape through your pores, it goes into your.
It would just evaporate.
It just evaporates.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I'm sure it looks like people, how kids used to play with mercury when they were young. It would just like melt around and be weird, you know?
Yeah.
Frank Zappa supposedly did that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why he was sober and so cool in his head. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really fun to play with, but I figure that might be a good scare someone off because they don't know that liquid nitrogen won't hurt them if it gets on them. So if you were to throw it at somebody, they might assume that you're trying to Boris.
You could also,
you're going to Boris them.
Yeah, you could also, the vessel could also be like a rocket. Basically.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I'll go with liquid nitrogen.
And also, it's a very chef's table weapon.
Sure.
If you look at the history of chef's table episodes or early seasons in particular.
It's a 50 best bartending weapon.
What are some rules of bartending and cocktail making that just should not be broken? And it's just like, you know what? Don't do that. Or it could also be trends that you're like,
Oh, there's tons of those.
Give me
oh
that.
My God.
Give me, first off, is mixology an acceptable word?
I understand the need to have a differentiation from styles of bartending, but I personally think mixologist implies that bartending is not a title that somebody wants. And I'm cool with being a bartender. I think it's fine. Some people argue with me and say that mixologist implies that you are engaging with these ingredients in a way that a service-based bartender, like, a drowning your sorrows-based bartender would engage with them versus a bartender that's creating a culinary experience.
Yeah.
Which I hear. And
who's really drowning, though?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. Right. Because I think that then it's right. It's like, but it's part of the storytelling of like, okay, here's why the drink costs $20 or, here's why it's different than just the thing. So the mixology is a way for kind of telling a story in a place that maybe they might not understand why.
Yeah.
There's a lot more care.
I understand that it's a necessary evil, but I'm hoping it's a stepping stone that will eventually disappear.
Well, I think, eventually people just understand that a bartender makes things in a mindful way if they choose to, right?
Yeah. But I mean, kind of paralleling it to your previous question, I think that the term mixologist and all these techniques that people like me use make people think they have to do those things in order to be an elevated person. Same way that a chef, might think that they need to use all these like espumas and stuff. Whereas like, I go to Dunsmore all the time and I'm just like, cook my thing on the fire and make it taste delicious, right? It's good quality product prepared well. My biggest pet peeve in the bar industry is people seeing these techniques, not understanding them, learning how to execute them, and then just using them on everything for absolutely no reason. Like clarification, I use a lot. I love it. I use it all the time because it's useful in certain applications. But like clarified lime juice, I understand it looks cool, but it tastes really good? Lime juice. If you take something out of lime juice, it's not going to taste as good as normal lime juice. But clarified lime juice is really good if you're going to carbonate because it'll carbonate better than clarified lime juice, things like that. So I think that there's a big trend of these things. I think the Mexico City bar scene is a really interesting one and a great example of that. So like we have this really ingrained cocktail culture here in the United States. I would say it's probably the only thing we've like created. It was like born here culinarily because we're a big melting pot, it's like there was no one else doing that beforehand, at least not at like that level. The old fashioned was made here, et cetera, et cetera. But Mexico City has a vibrant cantina culture and they're a big drinking culture. They have the best hangover food out of any culture I can think of, et cetera. As families, there's a 2-year-old birthday party there. A lot of people are staying up till 4 a.m., 6 a.m. Some comes up all drinking to celebrate just because it's like fun and they like alcohol and partying and drinking. But as a culture, there was like, certain cantina cocktails that would resonate. There was the Yerba Buena and like, Margarita is very popular, Paloma. But all of a sudden, the Mexican bar scene got a lot of attention, but it was all based around storytelling, fancy menus, these cocktails that looked insane, but basically doing that before you actually learned the basics. So you go to a lot of these cocktail bars where it's like we sent all these bartenders all over the world, and each one came up with one cocktail, and each one took one ingredient from this place and based it all around that. And then you try it, and you're like, this is awful, and it looks cool, right? But it's like it's not based on repeat business. It's based on people seeing this thing, hearing this thing, being in this ambiance. But they can't make you a decent daiquiri or drink it a decent martini. I'm not saying that's all of them. There's a lot of great bars in Mexico City, but watching, it's like my metaphor is like a good drummer can rock it with just like a kick drum, a snare, and a hi-hat, and they can play all sorts of stuff. If you're a drummer that needs to have 36 toms and do like a Terry Bozzio thing where you're spinning around playing on all these things like a maniac and you can't function without that, you're not a good drummer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you have to learn the fundamentals, and then you can apply your special instrument when you figure out how to use that.
If you can't cook a chicken breast, why are you creating this foam thing to put on it?
Chicken foam.
Yeah.
Delicious.
It's the good stuff.
Fantastic.
Like a schmaltz espuma.
Okay, now one more thing that I think that people actually would really appreciate. What are, talking about your kick, your snare, what is the equivalent of that for a home bar? What are the basics that somebody needs to set up their own little bar at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to make classics, etc., I think having like a nice, set of vermouth would be great, like a dry vermouth, a sweet vermouth. You can probably skip the Blanc vermouth because that's not as widely known, although I love having it. Modernly, I would say probably some kind of bitter, like a Campari substitute, because Negronis are simple to make at home. People love that stuff. And it's also nice, like digestive bitter if you want. Understanding that simple syrup is simple to make and you can have it on hand very easily and you do not need to go out and buy a bottle of simple syrup.
Right. Make your own simple syrup.
Yeah. You make your own simple syrup, which is great.
You can ask Claude about that. Yep.
Yeah. I think bitters is great for the classics. I mean, and that's where I'm assuming most people want to make these things at home.
So we're saying vermouth, bitters, simple syrup, and your favorite spirits.
Yeah, I think like a solid gin, like having just like a good representation of each category is great, but ultimately like you don't need all these frilly items to make a lot of these classics. So, and a lot of things go bad too,
Right.
So it's like you don't want to have all these ingredients you need to refrigerate or you don't need to blow it out. If you're trying to entertain, just have these simple things because like
what about gear?
Oh, like a shaker tin. Ideally, I'm not a big fan of like the fancy little cobbler shakers. I like the double tin, the ones that you see most bartenders using.
Yep.
Japanese bartenders rock those little shakers, but that's very technique driven, so I'd say less forgiven. I would love to say you need a Yari, which is the one you stir in, but honestly, if you have a shaking tin, you could stir in there just as well. But a bar spoon is great. Strainer is great. That's kind of all you need.
How do they throw the fire on the bar and then push the spirit through it?
I mean, with gusto,
like that guy.
Of course. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Oh, of course I do. Yeah, it's amazing.
Bar centerfold.
I think it's what is the name?
The guy who like cuts the ice like it's a samurai.
Yeah. And he also makes his own Campari and stuff like that. All menu in front of you. It's great. I mean, he's just taking alcohol and just high proof alcohol that would the proof would burn and throwing it on the bar top, lighting it on fire.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, but no, that's not for the home. I don't think typically.
I mean, it could be, but it's high risk. You
can't because of the liability. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Why be a barkeep? Why be a bartender?
Honestly, it's a unique breed of person, which is funny. And I notice almost every bartender I know goes, "Oh, I have ADD. I have ADD. I have ADD." And I think there is like a certain, and I honestly think it was one of my biggest hurdles. And I think it's what's made me successful because I've had to focus on it and actually make myself learn it, which is like bartenders, they like being social. They like working hard. They like doing all these things, but probably are not the kind of people that were great at homework in high school all the time. It's like people that want to perform extremely well in very fast-paced environments and then go home. It's not really one of those things where you take your work home with you, etc. But it's social, you're creative, you're very engaged, very interested. And then the second it's out of your peripheral, it's gone. And I think that is like a very enticing thing to a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people, I think, don't graduate to running their own programs because my job is like almost all homework now, so it's a lot of discipline and learning to do things that, you get well known for being in the spotlight behind the bar and doing these things. And then all of a sudden you have to do things outside of the bar, which can be tricky. But honestly, I just think it's about relating with people. I think it's a level of hospitality that is so beautiful just because, you get to that creative aspect. And then also, if you ever see a bartender and you try to tell them to take some tables like a server, you'll see this look of fear on their face. It's like you get to be social, but you also have this like safety. You're like, you're the one in control. There's this thing there. You're in charge of your space. People treat you differently than in the rest of the service industry. Like people come in and when they sit at a bar, there's a different expectation of how you relate with them, even in fine dining. People want to have a conversation. People want to get to know you. It's not as much just coming in and I don't know. It feels, I think service is a good word. It's people in the service industry like being in the service industry, but I would say that a bartender is a variation of that where you maybe don't feel as much like a servant and you feel more like somebody that you're engaging with, and it's more of an exchange of goods because you're basically the chef and the server. And that's pretty unusual in our industry. And I think that that's something that is a comfort zone for people.
Yeah.
I know a lot of very antisocial people that when they're behind my bar, some of my bartenders, they blossom and they become this version of themselves. And that's because they have their little safety net and they're used to, it's kind of like, people opening up when they're at their own house because they're relaxed, and it gives you that ability, but in a social environment. And that's like a really special thing. And I think that's a great tool for a lot of people. That's why I liked it for so long. You got to be social, but kind of on your own terms to a certain extent, because servers don't typically cut people off. Bartenders do, and things like that. It's fun.
Yeah.
Plus, we gotta drink the good stuff sometimes. It's good. It's fun. Yeah. We gotta dip into our own supply from time to time. Yeah, it's just fun. It's a fun job.
Yeah. What is the biggest mistake you've ever made as a bartender?
I mean, oh God, yeah. I remember very well. One of my biggest mistakes I ever made was accidentally mocktails were a thing. And I remember very clearly watching a 6-year-old make a face after trying his mocktail and realizing, oh, I just gave that kid alcohol. And his parent is extremely mad at me. And it was a mistake, but it was a horrible mistake. It's like, that one was not fun for sure.
And how did the kid turn out? Is he cool now?
I think he's probably pretty cool. Yeah. I am that kid now. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. I mean, that was like a very tangible mistake. I have this one where there's a bartender from India, and this one was like more recently, and I felt so freaking bad because I did his allergies and all that, and then I remember handing him a cocktail, and he was like, "Oh, what's in it?" I was like, "Oh, blah 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 blah," and Wagyu beef fat, and I went, "Oh my God, I totally forgot that we washed this thing with fat from this thing that he doesn't eat religiously. Not an allergy. He's gonna be fine." But there's this moment of us both staring at each other and being like, "I'm so sorry." He's like, "It's okay." I'm like, I don't think from looking at you, you think it's okay. I just basically made you break a religious facet. So that was a bad one. That was a bad one. That one stuck with me.
Yeah, stuck with him.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, Mírate ranked number 12 on North America's 50 best bars.
Yeah.
What is the criteria for that, and how do you ascend?
Honestly, it's an interesting thing. They're changing the rules a lot every year. We were one of the few bars that got on year one. We got in the mid 40s, which was pretty unheard of. And then basically once that happened, because we're one of the few bars that actually doesn't carry any of the sponsors, so I thought that would be impossible. I literally proved myself wrong. I used to be like, well, we're never going to get on this list, guys, and all these things. And I really proved myself wrong, which is great. But after that, it's about, basically the way that it works is they basically split beverage professionals and enthusiasts throughout the world, and they have to visit your bar, and they swip who's doing it every year. It has to be minimum of 20%, and they have to vote for you. And the more people that vote for you, the higher up you move. So it was actually really interesting for us because we actually got the highest climber award. So we went up the most. We jumped up the most from year one to year two. And I think that's just because people now were coming into town and they were maybe going to Thunderbolt, which at the moment was very high up on the list, noticing that we were also on there and being like, maybe I'll stop by and I'll try it. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people went, a lot of people liked it. So we got a lot more attention and hence more votes. But then also a lot of it, which is, I think at least to me, very controversial, is that it has been kind of established that you have to engage a lot with the modern pop-up culture. So basically traveling to other markets, exposing them to your bar in the hopes that they will come to your bar, try it, and happen to be a voter, which is interesting.
Yes.
But honestly, I think the biggest thing I've focused on that has been the most beneficial, and I think more people need to realize this, is that if they have to go to your bar to vote, it's actually better to create a stronger culture in your city for cocktails. That way people come here for that level of culinary tourism and experience it. So I remember one year, Los Angeles didn't get any on the list because none of the voters for the world's 50 best came to LA.
Right, because it needs to be a drinking destination, and then they're coming, they're trying the places, and then they're voting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's almost impossible here because LA is so ridiculous because unlike other cities, you can't just go bar hopping. Like you get in a car, you drive 40 minutes.
That's right.
It's like
the amount of distance.
Yeah, it's insane.
So what you need is like a nice little enclave in your neighborhood of like good drinking spots. And so kind of like encouraging your neighbor to step up their program.
So I think it's all about community building, honestly, like helping others to grow, mentoring people, letting them know what they need to do to open their own bar. I think that's a big one. But we did a lot of community engagement, and we did do a lot of traveling. And actually, I was really impressed by it because I work in Mexican spirits. So logically, the most pop-ups I did were in Mexico. And I think that benefited us a lot because in Mexico, all those bars are built out like race cars. So when I say that, I mean, you look at the menu and it's like everything's this massive alcohol brand. And that's coming from a place with a lot of small producers. So for me, it's kind of counterintuitive. And I think a lot of Mexican bar enthusiasts coming here to a place that was representing their culture, and they're seeing it almost more accurately represented in terms of the things that they produce and how they integrate it. I think people were really into that, and that's how we climbed up so much. But at the end of the day, it's just good for my team and good for the staff. So I try not to make it my personality. But you know,
you mean your list number, not your personality.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
can
like,
see that becomes like a consuming goal when you have like a score.
Oh yeah. Plus, I'm like, you know, I'm neurotic and Jewish. So the second we got the number 12 on the list, I was like immediately 2 seconds of happiness. And then this like dread of being like, oh, we're dropping next year. We're dropping. How can we maintain this? You know, so there's that aspect too. But no, but I love it.
You're not alone in that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Congratulations on that. And thank you for, bringing LA a little recognition.
Yeah, I love it. Front. We got more coming, I think.
There's been a lot of writing about how young people are not drinking as much.
Yeah.
How does that affect you? What do you, and why do you think this is happening, actually? That's the real question.
I think there's a variety of reasons. One, I think the economy is just shot. And unfortunately, like, I get so much freaking hate for having cocktails priced where they're at. And I just don't think people understand how expensive it is to operate a business and provide this service. It's like, it's not like I woke up one day and I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to price out a vast majority of people. It's just expensive, right? People now expect fancy ice, and the ice cubes cost like 70 cents a pop, right? It's like, and if you understand restaurant margins, that means that ice cube probably costs you $4 or $5, right? So things like that. But I think ultimately, it's like, I think culturally people typically do a counter swing a lot. And I know that my generation was one of the highest drinking generations of all time.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm 37.
Yeah.
So like logically to me, it makes total sense that a generation of people watching people like me getting fights with their girlfriends at their bar and being ding dongs and getting DUIs and stuff like that would be like, wait, it's expensive. That's what's coming from it. It makes you feel bad the next day, blah, 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 blah. And then, I just don't think they really understand. They don't have a need to have that cultivated interest like I do in the history and preserving this cultural aspect and interacting with food and understanding that. Like, so I think it's just, that's a big part of it. It's just like not understanding that, you know what I mean? It's like, and I totally get it though. It's like, I remember being in high school, me being like, I'm going to get drunk and make some mistakes, which is the stupidest thing you could possibly say or think, right? It's like, I'm going to let my inhibitions fly. I'm going to do something that I want to do that's repressed, and I'm going to let it out. And the next day I'm going to deal with it. So I get why people aren't doing that, but especially at a younger age, because you're socially drinking. So it makes sense to me that like, like at my age, I am drinking socially, but I also drink from like an appreciation level, and I love it. And if I could drink mezcal all night and not get schmammed, again, using that word. It's a great word. I would do that, but I think that's a big aspect of it. I also think that accessibility to other controlled or almost controlled substances is very high. Legal marijuana, I mean, it's not social, but like, dude, when I was that age, if I could just go into a store and just buy a bunch of weed, like who knows where I'd be these days instead of where I'm at, or another one, people are like microdosing mushrooms a lot and things like that. And I think that especially if you're surrounded by a lot of people that are of like mind in that eliminates also the social aspect of needing to fit in or wanting to go do these things. So I think it's a group mentality, and
Yeah.
I think it's not going to stick around. There's no way, but alcohol has been around eternally and for a very long time. Prohibition didn't succeed for a
Yeah,
reason.
exactly. So if like one boring generation comes around, it's not going to ruin it forever.
No, it will. But unfortunately, what it will do is it will eliminate a lot of the things that make it special, like the mom and pops. It's going to leave the big things that can survive, which is a bummer.
Tell me about a time that you let go of your inhibitions and did something crazy.
Oh man, like I have to pick one of those.
You can pick three, and we'll choose the best one.
Like, are you talking like high school, or are you talking like modern?
About a time, I don't know, whatever. Like you were just saying that, like because like when you're saying like let's make some bad decisions or whatever.
Oh yeah,
like that is not an uncommon refrain from our generation, at least. And so, tell me a story about that and how that affected you.
I mean, I think in high school, it made me do some stupid and fun things, but like I grew up in Napa, and Napa, a lot of people think that is they think about shmee Napa and visiting wineries and all that, but they don't really think about what it's like to grow up in what is an agricultural town with extremely seasonal tourism. Things shut down at like 6 p.m. So for me, it was an excuse to go do stuff. Like we would, go out into the middle of the woods and make a giant bonfire and go steal alcohol from Along's Drugs and go get drunk or whatever. But like we used to, I think the stupidest ones I look back on, which is like too many inhibitions removed, was we used to get drunk and then like climb railroad bridges to practice like graffiti stenciling. And, we'd be like balancing on beams and stuff and just being ridiculous. But it was all just to talk about it, or like, I don't know, like when I first moved to LA, I thought it was really funny because I went to a party and everyone was drinking and they had a nice pool. And one of the girls at the party was like, let's go skinny dipping. And I was like, hell yeah. And just jumped in the pool. And I looked up and all the guys that grew up here were looking at me like I was the devil because they were uncomfortable with doing that because they didn't grow up with that. And I was. So it made them look like they, were not as cool because they didn't do it. But when I was in high school, we would ditch school, go get drunk and go skinny dipping in the river, which is not something high school students are usually comfortable enough to do around each other. So usually getting drunk and making yourself do that until your brain normalizes it. And then you're like, yeah, I don't care, whatever.
Rock and roll,
baby. Yeah.
Where can we listen to your music?
Oh God. It's Spotify.
What's your band called?
I was in a band called Mouth of the Serpent for a long time, which I loved. It was great. I know.
It's dope.
I know, it's such a funny
Mouth
name.
of the Serpent.
It was very funny. It was like one of those things where I was like, that's our band name. All right. Then we actually started getting some traction. I was like, well, we're stuck with it now. Here we go. But yeah, that was a big one too. There was lots of drinking and inhibitions and stuff like that. Like for me, at least, like I became the front man of our band, which was not something I thought I was going to be. And that's a metal band. So you're screaming your brains out. You're doing all sorts of stuff. And like, I remember getting in front of a stage of people and just being like, oh my God, this is horrifying. And then, you get a couple of drinks in you and all of a sudden you're the life of the party.
Into the mouth of the serpent we go.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
There's a reason why lots of musicians, end up not drinking later on. It's because they lean on that crutch for that social lubricant when they're going on stage for a long time.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, what's like the biggest lesson that you've learned in your career that you're like taking into the future? What's like your mantra that you've learned?
Yeah, I think for me, it's basically look at the broad picture, make sure you're doing everything meticulously. If you really want to grow in our industry, we can't get distracted by shiny objects and just assume that that's what we need to do. It's like we are surrounded, in at least our industry, a lot of people will move into this and all of a sudden they find a community that they didn't have before, which is really big in restaurants. We all do the same thing. We work odd hours and all that, but particularly in the alcohol industry, the alcohol brands have identified that, and they realize that, oh, hey, if we buy a party bus and we take all these people that sell our stuff and we take them somewhere and we make our community built around a brand, that's something that is going to drive our sales, right? And it's creating false community around something that I think is under research, because no one knows if this brand that bought them the party bus is treating the people in Jamaica in their farms well and all these things. So I think like just the biggest thing, and it's the thing that I preach to my team the most, is just like, people, not brands. Like, we're not here to get obsessed with brands. Like, wine producers are awesome because they're producers. Wine brands are faceless and it's designed to get drunk. It's just about like actually understanding what you're doing with your actions, because there's so much implication in your personal health from finding these communities built around something that isn't scalable. And then also, like, for the longevity of the world, I think there's a lot of just basically voting with your dollar. So my mission in my programs is not to win awards. It's not to make banging cocktails. Honestly, it's to promote these spirit producers that are, I think, ultimately by, societal trends like people not drinking, going to disappear if we're not careful with it. And I preach that to my team all the time, because nothing is worse than watching somebody build a community and then the eventual outcome of abusing the thing it's built around, which is alcohol, completely makes you lose community. So not only are you losing a crutch, but you're also losing your support network at the same time. And that has got to be maddening and horrible. So I think, like, treating it as something precious that you have to take care of and knowing it could go away, it not only personally, but like globally, that's something I carry with me. And that's like my personal mission with my bar programs. So that's where things like awards mean a lot to me, because it means that people will see you can get rewarded for doing that and not just falling back on it.